And we are ready to begin.
Good evening and welcome to the February 4th meeting of the Athens-Clarke County Planning Commission. In response to the state of emergency regarding COVID-19, this meeting is being held via a WebEx online meeting platform, which is being broadcast on YouTube. Members of the public were provided the opportunity to email comments to the planning department prior to 12 noon yesterday. Members of the public may also address the Planning Commission in real time via electronic communication provided in the auditorium at 120 West Darty Street, subject to safe distancing measures. For those of you viewing the meeting remotely, you will find the meeting agenda on the Planning Department website at www.accgov.com/planning. For those of you viewing the meeting from the auditorium, on the table by the auditorium door, you will find copies of tonight's agenda and political campaign contribution disclosure forms for those wishing to speak in opposition to an agenda item before the mayor and commission. After staff presentation of an agenda item, we will receive public comment, first from the applicant and then from those in the auditorium. 10 minutes are allowed to address the commission for the applicant or their representative, and also for any specified interest group representative who has requested additional time prior to the meeting. 3 minutes are allowed for anyone else who wishes to address the commission. After public comment, the applicant or their representative may request a 2-minute response. Once the public hearing is closed, the Planning Commission will proceed to discuss and act on the item. We will receive no additional public comment unless requested by the Commission. When addressing the Commission from the auditorium, please speak from the designated place as directed by the staff member who is there in the auditorium. For all speakers, please provide your name, your address, and your occupation for the record. For those in the auditorium, a timer device will display an amber light 30 seconds before the expiration of the allotted time and a red light upon expiration of the allotted time. So please pay attention to the light so that I won't have to interrupt you. For those addressing the commission remotely, you will also be expected to adhere to the specified time limits. Please note that I have asked Brad Griffin, our planning director, to please be the timekeeper. And so Brad will be doing that for tonight's session. Exhibits may be displayed by the applicants remotely or in the auditorium. Written correspondence received by noon yesterday has been forwarded to the commission and is a part of the public record. Any additional written materials to be placed into the record must be read during public comment within the time limits previously stated. Please direct your comments to the Planning Commission and not to applicants. And for those of you in the auditorium, please refrain from applauding or jeering any of the speakers. I guess that could apply to any of us who are in our little boxes also. For everyone participating in this evening's meeting, please turn off or silence your cell phones. For commission members, please mute your microphone if you are not speaking. Use the chat box if you have any technical issues. Raise your hand to your camera if you'd like to speak. And please wait to be recognized. And please remember that this meeting is being recorded. All right, those seem to get, I feel like they get longer and longer every month, and I think they're exactly the same as they've always been. But at any rate, those things help to keep us straight and doing what we need to be doing. I will receive a motion to enter staff reports and other documents that have been submitted to the Planning Commission into the official record. Lucy has made the motion. Do I hear a second? Thank you, Jeff. All those in favor, please raise your hand. We have to give Rick time to count those votes.
Oh, it looks to be unanimous.
Thank you, Rick. Our first agenda item tonight is an appeal of a hearings. I'm sorry, Lucy.
Still have minutes and make it.
I'm so sorry. Had it right in front of me and just left it there. Yes, let's look at the minutes. You received the minutes in your packet. Do I have any changes, recommendations, or corrections in those minutes? If not, do I hear a motion for approval? Lucy has made a motion, and do I have a second? Jim Anderson has seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those were minutes of the January 7th meeting.
May I ask that the applicants, if you could just stop your video until your turn's up for your case, so we can make sure we see the hands. Appreciate it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Joy, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think I missed somebody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 10. It's 10. Unanimous.
Even if you stop your video, remember you can still hear and see what's going on. So, all right. Do we have any May courts comments?
No report. No report.
Okay. And do we have anyone in the auditorium who would like to speak about May courts? I see no one there. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then we will now move on to our first item on the agenda. The first item is an appeal to the Planning Commission to act on a ruling of the Hearings Board. And this makes the Planning Commission act in a different capacity than what we normally act in. And so for commissioners' benefit, as well as for the benefit of those of you who are joining us and are interested in our meeting, I think it's important for us to understand how the action that we're about to take on this appeal of a hearings board ruling, what it is that we do and what are our responsibilities as planning commissioners. So I've asked Michael Petty, our attorney, to please kind of run through that for us. Michael, can you do that for us?
Yes, ma'am. So tonight on this appeal, the Planning Commission is going to be acting as appellate review board. The Planning Commission has been given a complete copy of all the proceedings before the hearings board. That includes the staff reports and the minutes and the transcript. So you have everything that the board saw. At this hearing, the applicant is going to be able to have an opportunity to present an argument to you, just like in everything else. They're going to have 10 minutes, as are other parties. But it's important for you to realize that they can present arguments, but they cannot introduce any new issues, facts, or evidence because it's an appellate review board. So if any speaker does refer to facts, documents, or issues that are not in the record before the hearings board, you cannot consider that in your discussions. The part of the ordinance 948 is the ordinance that actually dictates this, and I'm going to read directly from that. It says that the hearing before the Athens-Clarke County Planning Commission shall be confined to a review of the record of the administrative hearing for error based on sufficiency of the evidence to support the findings and conclusions of the hearing board, that applicable criteria were met or were not met, or for based on procedural irregularities. So as I said, you're going to look at the record and you're going to be looking at whether or not there was insufficient evidence or whether there was procedural irregularities. And then you have several options about what you can actually do. after you review that, you may affirm the hearing board's decision if you find that there was no procedural irregularities and that there was sufficient evidence. You may affirm the decision and you may include conditions on that decision. You may deny the decision of the hearings board, or you may remand it. In other words, send it back to the hearings board for them to further develop the record. And I think that's all, Madam Chair, unless there's questions.
Thank you very much, Michael. I have been asked, Brad, if we would let people know when the time begins. And so we will say to you that the time officially begins after you give your name, your address, your occupation. Then at that point, the time will be. So I hope that helps. Just let me know if you need any further information about that. All right, so
We
Yes,
do try to point out too, for those applicants that may be sharing, if there's more than one person on the call with a particular item, they share the total 10-minute time period, but I think everybody is aware of that.
all right, so we will now move on with the hearing about this recommendation or this ruling from the hearings board. All right, and so the first person that will speak is, I assume, is it Mr. Patel, or who is speaking in this case? Who is the appellant? Mr. Dowdy.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, and you have 10 minutes, Mr. Dowdy. Thank you very much.
Okay. No problem. So my name is Wesley Dowdy, and I live in Young Harris, Georgia. My occupation for these purposes is development representative of VCube LLC. And it is our contention that the hearings board did not properly review our variance request pursuant to section 7421B of the code, which states to grant such variance from the strict application of the requirements related to sign height, sign placement, when due to special conditions, a literal enforcement of the provision of the statute will, in an individual case, result in unusual hardship. So the spirit of this chapter shall be observed, public safety and welfare secured, and substantial justice done. There are 7 conditions for the board to consider in the case of a hardship request. It is our contention that the board, A, failed to follow proper procedure when it found the applicant met the conditions of the ordinance, when it granted approval of one sign, but not both signs as originally requested, or B, failed to consider the appropriate criteria for this variance request. Therefore, the granting of an appeal and an overturning of the board's decision should occur by the Planning Commission. In section 7421B, the ordinance mandates the board consider 4 criteria in its review of variance applications. These are 1, unusual hardship, which has 7 subsequent conditions. 2, the spirit of the chapter to be observed. 3, public safety and welfare secured. And 4, substantial justice done. In the hearing on November the 11th, 2020, the board only considered 1 of the 4 criteria for variance. The board only took up the hardship criteria, and even then voted before deliberating on all of the conditions related to a hardship found in the ordinance. Specifically, the board failed to consider conditions 3, 4, and 5. Item 3 states that granting the variance requested will not confer upon the property of the applicant any significant privileges which are denied to other similar properties. 4, the requested variance will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of this chapter and will not be injurious to the general welfare and safety. And 5, the special circumstances are not the result of actions of the applicant. The board did consider conditions 1, 2, 6, and 7, and seemingly concluded each of these conditions had been met. The board failed to consider whether the spirit of the chapter would remain intact in granting the variance. In section 742, the objectives and purpose of the code, the intent is spelled out in several key phrases. It states, the goal is to, quote, preserve and protect the health, safety, welfare, and general well-being of the community citizens. It goes on to say the purpose is to regulate signage, whereby the sign itself will not cause, quote, detriment of sound driving practices and the safety of the motoring public, end quote. And the regulation should be administered, quote, without unduly interfering with motorists and causing unsafe conditions, end quote. Finally, the ordinance's spirit intends to prevent the, quote, aesthetic, cultural, and historical qualities of Athens-Clarke County, end quote, to be compromised, whereby the board should, quote, protect and preserve the aesthetic qualities of the community. Finally, the chapter intends to protect the, quote, enjoyment and value of property, end quote, and minimize unsightliness. We assert the board considered none of these issues with any specificity, and therefore the board did not adequately consider our variance requests in light of the written ordinance. In the course of hearing the applicant's request, the board never made mention of the public safety or public welfare, nor did the board consider condition 4 for hardship, which deals with these similar issues. Because of this, the board failed in its obligation to consider the third criteria for granting this variance. We also contend that the board did not consider doing substantial justice according to the ordinance. Substantial justice requires the board to consider how similar properties, hotel properties in this instance, in the property's vicinity have been treated. And at no point during the hearing did the board contemplate what was substantially just in this regard. The board ignored the fact that the applicant will be less competitive if it failed to grant the variance. Both of the nearest competitors to the applicant, which are visible from the site, have signs at their roof lines, which are much higher than the top of the first floor. In light of all of these facts that we've just discussed, that I've just mentioned, we now request that the Planning Commission overturn the board's decision and consider our appeal for the variance request and grant full approval of our original variance. When taking up the appeal, we note our agreement with the staff and board's conclusions on items 1, 2, 6, and 7 of the hardship criteria have been met, which the board stated in its review. Further, we believe conditions 3, 4, and 5 are met for the following reasons. A, as stated during the board's deliberations, other similar businesses have been granted variances or have signs which are mounted higher than the top of the first floor. Therefore, condition 3 is met because the board, by granting this variance, will not confer upon the property or of the applicant any significant privileges which have been denied to other similar properties, end quote. As to condition 4, there isn't any violation of the harmony or spirit of the ordinance. Therefore, granting a variance will not injure the public welfare or safety. It will not impede on motorists in any way. It will not adversely impact the, quote, aesthetic, cultural, and historical qualities of Athens-Clarke County, and it will not reduce or prevent the enjoyment and value of property. Finally, condition 5 is met as there are no circumstances that are, quote, the result of the actions of the applicant, end quote. Having addressed the spirit of the ordinance and the public's welfare and safety, as I just mentioned, we now move to criteria 4, substantial justice. The board must give proper attention to the substantial justice provision of the variance request to ensure, in part, the ordinance isn't unfairly or subjectively minimized through its actions. By not granting the variance request, an injustice will occur under the board's watch. If the applicant isn't afforded the same visibility as other properties in the vicinity, the applicant will not enjoy the same competitive advantages as other hotels, and thus the applicant will sustain financial harm. The hotels closest to the applicant's property have signs above the first floor. These include the Country Inn and Suites and the Hampton Inn, and therefore are advantaged if this variance fails. For the applicant to receive substantial justice, the board must approve this variance. In conclusion, the hearings board failed to consider all of the criteria required by the ordinance, and in doing so, they prevented a fair hearing of our variance request. Most substantially, the board failed to consider criteria other than hardship, which is required by the written ordinance. The spirit of the ordinance and doing justice are equally important, and the board must give the same weight to these criteria. Given proper consideration of these two provisions are enough to support the granting of the variance as initially requested. And a further review of the hardship conditions in their entirety, in light of the items included in what I've just presented, regarding those unconsidered items, will prove a hardship does in fact exist for the applicant, thus showing additional cause for granting this variance.
One
Thank you
minute.
for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dowdy. And now staff, Brad, who is responding or presenting that.
I don't know that in a case of this type of appeal, I don't know that we really make a formal presentation. Your role is to review the record and make a determination.
All right. So with that said, we will participate as a commission in discussion related to this request appeal. Ms. Rowland.
Maxine and Brad, I've dealt with these things since the hearings board, I think, was first, composed. And I believe we always got a report from the planning commission or the planning staff to us prior to taking any kind of input from the petitioner or anyone else. Is something changed? And Brad, you can answer that, and I'll mute myself.
I mean, honestly, I don't recall, Lucy, if you had. I think our charge is just to present you with a copy of the record and move forward. But
Well, the problem with having a librarian on the planning commission is I remember everything.
yes, you do.
And Jane, who was in charge of the hearings board some time ago, she always presented us with a report that included what the hearings board had decided and how they reached that decision. That's my only problem here. I think we're getting a little bit out of procedure, but if that is fine with Athens-Clarke County, it's okay with me. It's just that is not my previous experience going back 20 years, whatever.
Madam Chair, if I may, I don't go back quite 20 years. I'm getting close. I that's my memory as well. So I do feel like I'm a little at sea about guidance here, but I understand that our job is to review the evidence and see if the hearings board, one of the three options that the attorney just outlined for us at the beginning of this presentation.
Matt.
Yeah, I have I guess I wanted to start with just a question for the applicant, Mr. Dowdy. You spent some time talking about factors that you said the board had not explicitly considered, numbers 3, 4, 5, and 7. I think.
Matt?
Yes.
But I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Please excuse me. I feel like we may need to bring closure to the question from Lucy and Alice, which is a procedural question for us before we get into the hearing information.
Of
So
course.
if you hold, we'll come right back to you. I guess, Mr. Petty, if you would advise that we're fine to move forward. We do have the report that went to the hearing board from the staff, but do we have all the information, in your opinion, that makes us be able to move forward?
Yes, and what I would say is, I've been here, 4 years, and we don't have a lot of these. I know that at least once in the past, I wrote a brief memo to you, but it was mostly just what I went over prior to the meeting about the standards and things like that. What the ordinance actually says is you cannot consider anything except for the record of the hearings board. So I would say if we have done that in the past, that may actually violate the ordinance, because it is restricted to the evidence and the record before the hearings board.
Alice?
Yeah, thank you for recognizing me again. That's why Matt was just about to ask the petitioner a question, and I'm not sure if we're allowed to do that in this kind of hearing. This is very different from the way we usually act, which is as a advisory and even decision-making body, problem-solving body. But here we're an appellate court. So I see Lucy has her hand up, and so does Jim. So the other people have been here longer than me, so I'll stop.
So let's hold our questions just a minute and let Mr. Petty respond to Alice's question.
So I think he can ask a question for clarification. If it is presenting any additional information that was not included in the original record, then you cannot consider it.
I'm so sorry. I see several hands. Before I move to recognizing them, let's be sure we have finished with this discussion and we are really ready to move into a discussion of the hearing itself. Is there anyone who has any question about anything other than the hearing itself? I'll go with Lucy and then with Jim.
My experience with this goes back when the hearings board was first established. And I was chair of the planning commission, and Bill Berryman was the county attorney who served as our, hold on a second, I've got to kill my phone. Bill Berryman served as our attorney for the planning commission at the time. We always got a report directly from the person who was the planning staff member who attended the hearings board. And because this is an appellate, it's very important that we understand exactly what it is we are supposed to be doing. And Michael really did a good job telling us this, but it's still something we don't do very often. And as I told Brad earlier today, I said, Bill Berryman, who would be seated to my right when I was chair, when we would do one of these things, about 4 out of 5 times we got it wrong. And I really don't want to see us making a mistake. So I have a really strong feeling about remanding this back or doing anything with it at this point, because I really think the planning commission needs to hear, it isn't just a matter of reading the material. The planning commission really needs to hear the report from the planning staff member who attended that meeting. That's it, okay? I'm off.
Jim?
Yeah, I'm very confused here because what I heard Lucy and Alice say doesn't seem to be consistent with my impression of the information we were given. I thought we got a pretty complete transcript of what happened in that meeting, and therefore that we're in a position to do something with it. I might also add that I served on the hearings board as well, and this kind of a certainly one of the top 3 or 4 topics for hearings board requests for variances. And I don't think our ordinance really gets the whole thing right, but we can't make a decision about that in this meeting.
Then Matt.
Thank you. I just wanted to note, I'm looking at the ordinance now that Mr. Petty referred us to, and it does seem to contemplate that there are 2 parties, an appellant and an appellee. And I'm a civil procedure teacher, and those terms are well defined. The applicant here who lost below is appealing, and they're the appellant. And so I can only assume, and Mr. Petty, correct me if I'm wrong, that Athens-Clarke County would be the appellee in this sort of a proceeding. Is that right? Because if so, it says at the hearing, the Planning Commission shall hear first argument from the appellant and then from the appellee, which I take it would be Athens-Clarke County, followed by a 3-minute rebuttal from the appellant. So it's described in the ordinance as being an adversary proceeding where I presume Athens-Clarke County, since there's nobody else who could be defending the decision below, would make a presentation, but not first. They would go second, which is also normal in litigation in appellate courts, that the party defending the decision below responds and goes second. So, Mr. Petty, is that your understanding?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. But I think they would. But if Athens-Clarke County wanted to, they could respond to it. They would be limited by the same rules as referring to only evidence that was in the record.
And there's no obligation that they respond, right? If they wanted to just stand on the written record, there's nothing. There's no reason they couldn't do that. And we do have, as Jim pointed out, the written record.
That's correct.
Thanks.
Okay, so I guess at this point, if everybody could mute, that would be helpful. A lot of feedback. Jim. There you go. I think at this point, then we need to make a decision about whether or not we are going to act on this, or whether we need to have information from the planning staff. Jim.
I would like to make a comment regarding whether or not the hearings board really addressed the concerns of the appellant. It's my impression that they actually went to great lengths to try to satisfy his concerns.
Jim, if we could not act on the hearing itself, but let's talk procedurally about how we're going to make this decision. It seems we're at a bit of an impasse here. So we need to decide if we believe we have enough information, or perhaps somebody's open. Whether the decision is that the planning staff is saying they have given us all the information that they intend to give as the appellee. Perhaps that solves the problem. And if so, we can move forward. I'm Sarah and then Lucy.
This is, I think, the 3rd or 4th time we have done this since I've been on the commission, and either we've been doing it wrong every time, or the information that we provided in our packets is Athens-Clarke County's presentation, more or less. So in terms of sort of if I feel like I have enough information to go on, my answer is yes. And in particular, I don't know if y'all remember that I think 1 or 2 times ago, we didn't get the transcript, and that was not great, but we do have the transcript. So based on just generally feeling like we have enough information to go on, I'm comfortable with that. The legal issue that Matt is bringing up and that Lucy's bringing up, I can't speak to that, but I would say that if Michael feels that we are crossing all of our T's and dotting our I's, I'm comfortable proceeding with that.
Thank you, Sarah. Jeff and then Lucy.
What I heard was that the county has the opportunity to present, but not the obligation. So them having had the opportunity and choosing not to exercise it, I'm comfortable with that. I mean, whether or not it helps us make a decision or gives us information we may want, the information we need is the information. The information we have is the information we get, and I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you, Lucy.
I disagree because, I mean, like I said, if everybody wants to throw out what we've done the last 20 years, that's fine. I'm kind of tired these days. Everybody is. But my understanding is that the planning staff served as Athens-Clarke County surrogate in presenting the report to us in the same way that the planning department presents the petitions to us on each of these that we're going to be doing tonight. And if that's not the case, perhaps we don't need to have the planning department present things because we get everything in writing. And if that's what people want, I think it's a huge mistake because the public is seeing this. If the public is seeing this and we have the written reports, but the public does not have the written reports, what does that mean to transparency in Athens-Clarke County government? I just want everybody to think about that for a minute. We get those written reports. The public does not get those written reports. I'm trying to get my head wrapped around this, but I'm not happy with work going forward with this without having it as something that the public can see on tape in this case, or the public could see in the old days coming down to the planning department and hearing Jane stand up there and give her report on a hearings board.
Anyone else have a comment? Jeff?
I understand Lucy's point, but the information is available to the public, not conveniently, but it is available. And Jane did not stand up and read the transcript to my recollection. So, you know, it was an explanation, but it was not the record. It seems to me the easy way to handle this is to ask the planning department if they would like to present anything to us in regards to this matter before we proceed. And I just wanted to add too that we've had several regular item issues where we never heard from the applicant and we went ahead and acted on those. I don't know what that means, but it happened. So I'd like to ask the county if they have anything to present to us, or if they would, are they giving up their opportunity to present their side? I don't know. I would also add that I'm not sure. I would be cautious of not hearing this action. I'm curious if we have that option of just ignoring it and striking it from the agenda due to some procedural question that's sort of in doubt. So that's my two questions.
Thank you, Jack. I guess perhaps the question is, and I did mention this before we started our comments, that perhaps the planning staff might say that what we have is all of the information that they are planning to present. If so, then I think we will move forward. Brad?
I mean, we're not prepared to make a presentation. It's my recollection that the presentation, Lucy's right, Jane used to give a presentation, but it was basically the PowerPoint presentation that she gave to the board. I'm gonna mute Maxine real quick. Okay. It was the PowerPoint presentation. I believe we've included that as a hard copy in your packet, and you know, and then she would go through the standards and the criteria as we presented to the board. But that basically, when Jane did that, she was reading verbatim from the questions you have in the staff report and our position on each one of them to give a recommendation. So, and I tend to kind of agree with Mr. Petty that if I were to try to reproduce that PowerPoint presentation for you tonight, there is no way that I could assure you that I'm going to say exactly the same thing that was said to the hearings board. So I guess that's a long way of saying that we feel like we've presented the information in writing and we're not prepared to present any more.
Alice.
Amy, thank you again for letting me talk one more time. You know, just as someone who was raising procedural questions at the beginning of this conversation, I just want to say that my concerns are completely answered. We do have the transcript. We can see what Gavin presented to the hearings board, and it probably doesn't really need to be repackaged again by staff for this particular kind of proceeding. I agree with Lucy that if we didn't have staff presentations on the rest of our agenda, but this is a different thing. This is us reviewing evidence. So I am fine with proceeding with this hearing, and my one question about whether, you know, we're allowed to question the appellant has already also been answered by Mr. Petty. So I'm ready to move on whenever everybody else is.
All right. Then I think I will entertain a motion about whether we will, we feel we have enough information to move forward, or
so moved.
So moved. All right. Thank you, Alice. Do I have a second, Lucy? No, you're not seconding.
I would like for the planning staff to get together and figure this out with the attorney's office. This has been going on for over 20 years, and I guess I'm the last person in line that ever did this. But I think it's really important. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, I need to get a second before we have the discussion, if I could, please. We have a motion. Alice, do we have a second? Jeff and or Matt? I don't know who was first. Go with Jeff. All right, now discussion. Are we ready to vote on this, or do we have further discussion? Lucy, excuse me, I interrupted.
I'm getting very frustrated. It's a question of whether the motion has anything to do with what I'm saying, which is I think the planning staff and the attorney's office really need to get together and figure out exactly what needs to come to the planning commission on an appeal. And Michael, I don't know if you've ever dealt with one of these things before on an appeal. Have you? Okay. I didn't, you know.
We don't have a lot of these, Lucy, but I've dealt with these, and I've dealt with half a dozen or more historic preservation appeals, which are more.
Okay, but I'm talking about an appeal from the this particular hearings from the hearings board to the planning commission. Have you? How many have you dealt with on that one? I mean, seriously.
I think one.
Okay, I mean, so I just really think this is something that needs to get taken care of, so we all know we're on the same page.
Okay, Matt. Matt, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry.
No, I just seconded the motion earlier. No, I wasn't raising my hand after that. I thought we were going to vote.
I'm sorry. I was making sure we were ready to vote. Jim?
Jim, you're muted.
Can you hear me now? Yes? Now I don't hear you. You're muted. Okay. I'm very confused here because it seems to me we need to be discussing the information we were presented. Are you saying we should vote on the whole thing before we do that, or what's the order here?
No, Jim, we had a motion, we have had a discussion where some of our commissioners felt like we did not have the information that we need to make a decision. We've had a discussion about that. Then we had a motion to move forward. We had a second to that motion, and now I'm trying to be sure that everyone is ready to vote on the motion to move forward and discuss the hearing, the appeal. All right. I am assuming there are no more questions, and so now we will vote. If you would like to vote yes on the motion, which is to move forward and hear the appeal, please raise your hand. I can't vote.
Appears to be 6.
No, that's not right.
4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 6.
7.
7, sorry.
7, yes. All those against? One.
Did someone abstain?
I did. I realized I shouldn't be voting, so only vote next to the tie.
There were 8 on the vote first, 8-1.
Okay.
All right. Then I think we will move forward now on our discussion of the appeal. Matt.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the applicant if he can speak to criteria 6, because I went over the transcript and it seemed to me that the hearings board considered, any criteria that they didn't discuss. I take it they found were satisfied because they did grant the variance on the Broad Street side, and the only language in the transcript that explains any possible rationale for denying the variance on the Hawthorne Street side is Mr. Powell's remark at the bottom of page 7 that says, and I quote, I feel more favorable to the sign that faces Broad than I do to the one that faces Hawthorne, where I believe a sign that meets the requirements of the zoning can be done without any hardship. And so I didn't hear the applicant, Mr. Dowdy, speak much about criteria 6. I was a little troubled by the hearings board decision. It struck me that if they found the 7 criteria satisfied, which I think there's ample evidence that they are, and they granted the variance on the Broad Street side, I had a hard time understanding a decision not to grant the variance on the Hawthorne Street side. And I noted in driving around there that the Hampton Inn, one of the competitor hotels nearby, has roof level signage facing both south and west on those 2 sides of the building. The Hampton Inn, the competitor of the applicant, does have west facing signage. And so I just wonder if you could, it strikes me that maybe there's not enough to justify a distinction between these 2 requested variances. But there is a little bit of language in there. And I wonder, Mr. Dowdy, if you can just speak to that. Again, just in terms of what evidence is in the record about the inadequacy of a compliant sign facing Hawthorne. That is a second floor signage facing the Hawthorne side.
Okay, just to make sure I understand your question, because you referenced criteria 6, we view that the board considered criteria 6, and we contend that we agree with their decision relative to item 6. So I may have misunderstood your question, but we don't think that they didn't consider criteria 6 in their decision.
Right. No, they discussed criteria 6. And, both at the bottom of page 7, Mr. Powell's remark.
I don't have a copy of it.
Oh, you don't have the transcript with you. Okay.
That was
Mr.
provided to me.
Mr. Powell says at 2 points in the transcript that on criteria 6, he has an easier time seeing granting the variance facing Broad Street than facing Hawthorne. And I take it that the rationale is you got the building's well back of Broad, and so you need the sign to be high up or it's not going to be seen by traffic on Broad. I think I understood his remarks to suggest that on criteria 6, he thinks you don't meet the criteria for the Hawthorne Street sign. That is, he thinks you don't meet criteria 6 for the Hawthorne Street sign because you could comply with the sign ordinance facing Hawthorne by having a sign that's on the second story, and that would not be a hardship. But if that's not your understanding, I don't want to, that's just what I took from the transcript, but that he said you didn't meet criteria 6 for Hawthorne, but you did for Broad.
Well, and I'll speak to that to say that as you make the approach to the building, which I think was mentioned during the hearing, it has been quite some time, so that the sign, the building is an L-shaped building, or an angled building to some extent. It's not quite a 90-degree angle. And the Broad Street sign, you would almost have to be directly in front of the building to see the signage. And thus, if you're someone who's arriving at the hotel, you would actually be afforded a whole lot more benefit by seeing the sign on the Hawthorne side than the sign on the Broad Street side. And so I would say hardship does exist on both, for the reason I just mentioned. And I would agree with your analysis that that they're essentially one and the same. I mean, if a hardship exists on one, I think the hardship exists on the other, because it's all about the same foundational item, which is visibility of the signage for the identification to the potential customer. And Hampton has 2 signs that are visible. We sit back a lot farther than they do, and we need to be able to capture that visibility.
Thank you.
Kristen?
Yeah, I think, so going back to our charge in, looking at the decision that was made in the process, I think what I keep tripping up on is when the request is split into 2 signs. And I'm tempted to make a motion to remand it back to the hearings board, simply because I think this whole case can benefit from the hearings board taking the opportunity to go back to, this is sign number 1 that we're approving. These are the reasons. This is sign number 2 that we are not approving. These are the reasons. Like, it is not my place to decide which sign should go or not go. I think that this whole thing could benefit from some additional clarification from the hearings board.
Sarah, and then Jeff.
I think what's important, and that we've, that the attorney's office has communicated to us several times over the years about how we're supposed to function in these types of hearings, that we're ideally supposed to function on the hearing, the procedure of the hearing, whether we see any irregularities associated with that. And for me, the thing that I am tripped up on is kind of relates to what Kristen said, but it's that my understanding about how the hearings board is supposed to operate is very much in line with looking at very closely at these 7 criteria. In reading the transcript, there is a element of arbitrariness to that decision to split up the 2 signs and make a different decision. I think that is procedurally problematic, and I am less inclined to recommend that it be remanded. I'm more inclined to honestly, I'm more inclined to affirm the decision with the condition that both signs be granted. That's kind of where I stand right now in the conversation.
Jeff?
Yeah, I was going to go ahead and agree with Kristen. I think that if it goes back to the hearing, it solves a couple of problems. One, it gives us time to address the original question that we're not talking about right now about procedure, but it also gives the hearings board a chance to provide their own transparency in that they can affirm their decision with a little more indication of exactly how they got to it. I admit that I read the transcript. It was not entirely clear to me until I got here tonight and listened to the additional explanation. It really wasn't clear to me exactly how they had arrived at their decision and exactly why they did. So I had problems with understanding what their procedure was or whether or not it was the correct decision. So I think giving them a chance to go back and explain their point and maybe giving them a chance to go back and revisit this with the idea that their decision does need to follow a definite procedure and they need to explicitly address each one of the concerns so that we do get in the event we see it again, or in the event that the public sees it, that there is a clear explanation of exactly how that decision was reached.
Katie?
I just want to say I agree with that. I think that would satisfy if they showed, if they were much more systematic about looking at whether the standards, the 7 criteria, had been met for each sign.
Joey?
I'm going to, I tend to agree more with Sarah, as far as not sending it back to the hearings board. I do have, I'm serving on the hearings board for 8 years. I know this was something that I saw a lot when we were there. And I believe Jim maybe mentioned it earlier. It's probably an ordinance that needs to be looked at, but that's not for us to decide tonight. But I do have procedural problem with it being split with the 2 signs. I as Matt said, seeing how the criteria were met on the one on the Broad Street, but not on the Hawthorne. I know reading this transcript, I know how, if I were in the room, how I would have felt that day. But today I see, I'm not sure I agree with splitting the 2 signs out. I think if it was met on one, it was met on the other. I right now I'm leaning, I believe Sarah may have said approve or affirm with the condition of both signs being done. That's kind of where I'm standing right now, because I'm having a problem separating the 2 signs when one was met and they're saying one was not.
Any other comments? Jim?
Yeah, I agree with a number of the points that were made. I went by today and I noticed that it's very obvious that they need relief on the Broad Street side, and the hearings board granted that to them. The Hawthorne Avenue side, the Hampton Inn does not have signage on that side either. So it seems like there's some consistency in the decision, although I agree that the notion that you might see it better coming from the west if it were on the Hawthorne Street side would help from Broad Street as well. So we have a little bit of a sticky wicket here. And a real irony is that while the view of their hotel from the Hawthorne Street side is not really obstructed right now, because they have complied with other ordinances that require them to plant trees, in a few more years, a ground level sign will not be visible on that side either. So the suggestion of going with the allowance of both might be an attractive alternative.
Lucy?
This has gotten kind of convoluted. I really think that this needs to be remanded, and the reason is and Michael Petty may be able to help me with this. Are we really in a position to split the difference or not? I mean, they have sent up a decision. Normally, and maybe Mark can say something to this as well. They sent a decision. Are we here to overturn the whole decision? Are we here to? I don't know what we're doing, to be honest, at this point. I'm feeling very uncomfortable with saying we're just going to get rid of things. I mean, I'm having a problem with this thing. It's very Michael. Maybe Michael can address it.
Yeah, could I make one comment as chair? It would seem to me that if we overturn it, then the appellant gets the variance, which is the 2 signs. If we remand it, then they look at it again. So we are not deciding 1 sign or 2 signs. We either are going to overturn the decision, or we're going to send it back, or we're going to deny it. So just to clarify, I don't think we're making the decision about 1 or 2. We're making the decision about the decision. Several people had their and Mr. Petty, does that answer that question?
Yeah, what I would say, Madam Chair, is I understand Ms. Rowland's, because it is a little weird if you were going to deny it, and that's the language of the ordinance, when there's 2 things that happen there. I think the better way to do it is, if you wanted to approve both of them, is to do it the way Ms. Beresford said it, is that I would approve it with the condition that the other one be approved as well.
Thank you, Mr. Petty. Other comments? Matt, and then Katie.
I think I'm on the same page as Sarah as far as what I would do if it were just up to me here. I think affirming the decision with the condition that both signs be approved makes sense to me. And I would just note that in terms of our authority here, the ordinance says that we can look at both procedural irregularity and the sufficiency of the evidence to support the findings and conclusions of the hearings board. And it strikes me that, to my understanding here, there's sufficient evidence in the record to support the findings and conclusions of the hearings board that the criteria are met for the Broad Street sign. And I think there's insufficient evidence to support their finding that the criteria are not met for the Hawthorne Street side. That's how I'm conceptualizing it. Is just that we'd be approving with condition, and rejecting their finding on Hawthorne because I personally don't see enough in the record to justify the distinction they drew between the 2 signs. And the last thing I want to say, just to clarify, for a moment I thought Jim was disagreeing with me, and now I think he's not, on the factual question of the Hampton Inn signage. The Hampton Inn does not have a sign facing Hawthorne, which is the east side of that hotel, but it does have a sign on the west side of that hotel, which faces, out toward the McDonald's and the Arby's and the other stuff that's further out that way. So the Hampton Inn is similarly situated to the applicant's request in that it has signage on the south and west facades, and that's what I take the applicant to be requesting. And so that's what I was referring to earlier on the Hampton Inn signage.
Seeing Kristen.
I guess I'm just going to say I just have a fundamental issue with overturning the decision therefore approving both signs without seeing a full presentation. I mean, I feel like we're being asked to just kind of look through these papers and make a decision that was not ours to make to begin with. And so I just have a fundamental issue with and I'm sorry, I'm not fully understanding what the affirmation is, I guess, but I think I would like to move to remand back to the hearings board. So help me out with how the wording of that is. Does that mean that's a denial of the request? Or is that I move to remand it back to the hearings board, period?
That's it.
The wording says to remand the planning action back to the hearings board for further development for the record.
Okay, then that's the point I'd like to make.
Do I hear a second? Jeff is the second, okay. And so further discussion. Lucy, did you have further discussion?
I think that's appropriate for a number of reasons. There's a lot of confusion here tonight about whether or not it's appropriate for the planning commission to overrule them on these things, because we have not really heard anything except the appellant's comments. And as I've said before, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and I really believe the planning commission achieves a lot from hearing from planning staff as to exactly what went on. I think there are other people in this group that understand what I'm talking about. And maybe I'm being too conservative about this, but I think it's extremely important we get this right.
I have a comment about that, but I'm going to hold that comment until after we make a decision here. Okay, now our discussion now is about the motion that Kristen made and that Jeff seconded, which was to remand the planning action back to the hearings board for further development of the record. That's the context of our discussion only. Joey.
I'm just going to say I'm not sure I'm in agreement with that, and I guess with Lucy's comments, because I feel like that Planning Commission had the opportunity to present. If that is the way it's been for 20 years, then they should know how the procedure works, and they have an attorney sitting here with us that should have advised them that you have that opportunity. What we're supposed to go on is what happened that night, and we have the transcript of what happened that night. You're trying to make them recreate their presentation when we have it. We have the summary. We have the summary here. We have the transcript, and sitting in that board, I know they basically read that to us as they're presenting with their slideshow. So they had every opportunity. I think we're trying to find ways to give them more opportunity. So I can't be in support of sending that back. I think we're trying too hard to find a way when we have the information here, and I believe we need to act on it.
Katie?
I disagree. I see in the transcript that they really didn't consider all 7 criteria.
And so that is what we have to act on. I guess I'm needing to say I'm not, well, if the transcript itself is what we are looking at. You will recall the last one we did not have the transcript, and it was very difficult to make a decision. And so we decided immediately thereafter that we would always have a transcript as a part of this. And so we have the transcript. So we have every single thing that happened in the hearing. Now, whether you are, I think for me, whether I'm not sure what I'm hearing us ask for, an interpretation of the transcript. Is that what we're asking for? And I think I heard Mr. Petty, our attorney, say that would be dangerous, that we don't need someone's interpretation of the hearing. We have the transcript. That's what we're supposed to use, as I understand it. So I'm sorry, I didn't want to get into that in the middle of this, but it keeps coming back up. Okay, Sarah.
I agree. I think it's coming up because, you know, it's related to Kristen's motion in a way. And I agree with what Joey said. I agree with the I can't imagine what, this is the most information I've ever gotten in one of these since I've been on the commission. So I feel like I've got the information I need. I think Matt brought up a good point. It's sort of, we're looking at whether we're procedurally okay with it and whether there's sufficiency of evidence to support the hearings board decision. So I'll be quiet because I think you want to have a vote happen on the motion that's currently on the floor.
Any other clarifications before we vote? Then I'm going to call for the vote. The motion is to remand the planning action back to the hearings board for further development of the record. All right, let's do a roll call vote, please, Rick.
Okay. Morales,
Yes.
Rowland,
Yes.
Scarborough,
Yes.
Tucker,
No.
Anderson, I'm sorry, Jim, I didn't hear you. Okay. Beresford,
Wait, excuse me, was that a yes or a no, Jim? Yes, okay.
Beresford,
No.
Goodrum,
Yes.
Hall,
No.
and Kinman.
Yes.
Okay. Passes 6-3.
You're muted, Maxine.
I just said that has just been remanded back to the back to the hearings board for further development of the record. And so now we will move to our second application. First one in old business. And this application is case number PD-2020-10-2869. It is at 2150 Lexington Road. And this applicant is requesting to amend an existing RS5 PD to remove conditions that were previously imposed. So Rick, can you take us through that?
Okay, sorry about that. So this is the Lexington Road location here at it's in the Lexington Heights neighborhood. See the airport is on the airport overlays on the north side of Lexington there. So it's not in the airport overlay. The hatched lines are non-conforming duplexes in the RS zone. So this is the aerial photograph. You can see the similar occurring conditions. We have the sort of the gravel parking area over here, the main sanctuary, and we'll get to a site plan here in a second. This is the future land use isn't changing in the zoning. Again, not changing. We're just amending some conditions of the plan development. This is the current binding site plan from 2018. Just to point out a few things, this one did have the driveways closed, and then there was a connection to the entrance, one entrance here on Lexington Road, and then also connected to the parking lot on Lexington Heights, which had a couple of entrances. So the request is to amend the conditions of the PD. There's about 5 conditions would be removed. It's including a parking buffer. The parking buffer is to remain. It actually was the condition is basically to remove, the request is to remove the condition, and the parking buffer will remain, so that condition is no longer needed as part of the binding plan. There was a fence that was along a side property line that was not put up to code. That's been taken down, so that condition is no longer needed. Again, the driveway closures, they were asked, well, the plan has to show, it shows 2 driveways being closed on Lexington. That was something our Public Works Department requested, and that was shown. There was at one time, I think, a drug rehab facility on the site that's been removed, so that condition is also asked to be removed. The PD that you have before you now, the PD plan would allow the parking lot to be improved to code, and other minor improvements such as a shed, there's a basketball court, some other minor site improvements. Also some stormwater management improvements. Again, the traditional neighborhood future land use designation will remain. This is the site plan that's been submitted for this proposal. You see the driveways remaining open, the parking lot improved to asphalt parking. Other parking improvements between this entrance on Lexington and the parking lot on Lexington, so there's a connection there. There's existing building back here, which we only show right now as a duplex officially and on record. This calls administrative programming as like an office use. And then the basketball court here, there'll be a house removed back here. That's part of on the 2018 plan as well for a stormwater management pond. Other stormwater management areas. So we appreciate that this plan will improve some existing property conditions that are not conforming. And 3 of the 5 conditions have been met: the fence, the rehab center, the parking buffer. The 4th condition, to note building 1 as a duplex, has not been met. Again, the new plan shows it as an office use. And in the 5th condition, to close the 2 driveways on Lexington, 2 of the 3 driveways on Lexington has not been met. So they're still shown, they're shown on the new plan. So we are recommending approval with conditions that the driveways either be closed or optionally be made one way, one as a right in and one as a right out, so that it'll help on the conflicts there. Having 3 driveways in a row with the 45 or 50 mile per hour traffic is, when everybody's coming and going at the same time from church services, we feel like is a safety hazard. And so we're also asking that all the parking areas be connected, because if they are made one way, somebody would have to do a U-turn somewhere on the busy highway to come back to find parking elsewhere. So we're asking that the parking areas be connected as shown on the 2018 plan. Again, staff permit needed to change building 1 duplex to an office use. And then accessible parking spaces, we feel like they're gathered together. They can be better distributed as well as closer to some of the buildings. And that concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much, Rick. And so now I assume we'll be hearing from Mr. Carter. Is that right? Jeff Carter. As the applicant.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Carter. But
Kevin Stout with Living Hope is on the line here.
Mr. Carter, We would appreciate a visual if you could turn on your video.
How was that? I'm
Great,
sorry.
sir. That's all right. We're all,
Uh,
it's difficult to manage all the buttons. So thank
It
you.
is. It is. Good to be with you. I'm Jeff Carter, 3651 Marsfield Road in Watkinsville. And we are the civil engineers on this project and have been helping this church and the previous church that was there for several years. I think some of these issues could be better explained by the actual church members, and I would like to yield my time to Kevin Stout, who is on with us. And I think he can explain some of the reasoning behind this request.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. And if you'll mute, that's great. Mr. Stout.
Church. I live at 135 Shannon's Place in Comer, Georgia. This is a fellow pastor.
McDuffie Drive in Athens, Georgia.
Please be patient with us. We're at church, but done talking, but instruments are loud, so I'm sorry if there's background noise. Amended, we're hoping with approval, our site plan to better serve the community. I'm not sure if I'm able, using this program, to share my. I'm familiar with Cisco. I work a lot with Zoom. I work with teenagers and college students a lot. They're not.
Got one thumbs up.
Okay, we got one thumbs up. Half court, and this half court will be surrounded by a fence. Create during our meetings as a church. We have typical meetings on Wednesday night and Sunday morning. This access right here, we are proposing reworking it to provide a much all of our handicap parking in one location. As well, this will be a raised the other on Sundays, or people move through to the buildings throughout the week. There's a safe place for them to access throughout the entire property to every single building. The upper parking lot, we are requesting to not close these curb cuts and supervisor today, and so we're actively working with him to make sure that we meet all steps. Being we wanted to remove this large entrant driveway that we had previously shown is two massive oak trees here, and we would really like to preserve every single week to congregate before and after services, because it provides a safe place for some of the reasons we are requesting this amendment to be changed, as well as much storage. I know the property looks huge, but unfortunately we don't have that much, and so we've I don't know how to stop sharing screen. I'm sorry. There it is. When you use it. We did note that in the staff recommendations that they're quadrant of the parking lot, which is in the northeast sector, to the parking lot that's right next to what the staff mentioned that they're worried about people having to go do a turnaround on Lexington Heights. But I would ask the staff, I don't know if this is the right venue for that. People coming and going from parking lots within the campus when you have people moving from building to ask those questions. I'm not 100% sure.
Mr. Stout, your internet doesn't seem real stable. And so we're not getting all of your words. Maybe Jeff can help if there are. So I want to make sure that if you're asking for some change from what you submitted, I couldn't tell what you were asking for. So I just need to make sure we're not hearing so clearly what you're saying. So don't know how to rectify that, but I need to be very sure that you understand we're acting on this report from the planning stage. Are you there?
Maxine, are you able to see that Mr. Stout is
If you cannot hear us, unfortunately the internet is acting up.
We hear every third word, so we're putting it together. Okay, so in the
submission, Carter.
Brad, he said that he's asking for clarification about the staff recommendation. Are we doing that at this time, or how shall we?
Well, I'm still at this point. I don't know if he wants to finish, and then I've kind of paused his time because we've stopped him. But
yes,
I mean,
then maybe Mr. Stout, finish your presentation, and then we'll speak.
I'm not sure if this is any better or not.
No, it isn't. It's almost easier if we see your face. Oh, Alice said that seems better. I'm sorry.
Clarification from the staff regarding their recommendation for a that was something that we saw today, and it was a little surprising. Way movement within the interior of the property would provide people to then enter back onto Lexington Road and turn around.
Mr. Stout, what we are asking is for you to complete your presentation, and then we will have a response to your question.
Okay, I'm finished.
All right. And your question is? What is the question you want answered, Mr. Stout?
Staff on the two-way driveway between the parking areas.
What is your question? Ask a question, please, and then we'll be able to move on.
Maxine, can you hear him? He's asking, he would like to have staff clarify that request.
Could I?
The two-way access.
Yes, Jeff, that's great. That would be helpful if you could intervene.
Yes, ma'am. I think the question on the recommendation by staff, I believe they were recommending that the two parking lots be connected by a two-way access drive. And I think that's the nature of the question. We had not seen that, or the church had not seen that suggestion. And I think they just wanted to clarify that that's the case.
Rick, can you put the site plan back up, please?
Yeah.
We need everybody to mute, please, Kevin and Jeff. Mr. Yeah, there we
Okay. Can you see my arrow on the screen?
Brett, maybe I can do it.
Okay, you do it. Yeah.
I think we're talking about a connection between these two parking lots here. Because we were trying to mention earlier that it's just, I mean, if these are to stay, we prefer that they be right in, right out. And if someone's going right out only, they're gonna have to go down the highway to try to get back into here. So we were, do a U-turn down the highway. So we're thinking if there could be a little short cut through in this area, that they wouldn't have to go down, do a U-turn. If they can't find a space here, they can just go right over into this other lot on Lexington Heights.
Thank you for that clarification, staff. All right. I think at this point we will take input from the public. I can't see there's the room. Is there anyone who wants to speak in favor of this application? Seeing no one present, I'm assuming there's no one who wants to speak in opposition to the application. So we will come behind the rail and have discussion amongst planning commissioners. Alice?
Hearing no discussion, I assume that people agree with me that we're ready to take a motion to accept the staff recommendation to approve with conditions.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Lucy seconds.
The only thing I can figure, how is this thing 2 years old? I thought I saw it last week. This really is kind of new to me, and I'm really glad to see where they're going with it. It's really good. It's a big improvement.
Lucy, did you second that motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. All right. Do we have discussion? Joey?
I just have a question. I like the plan and everything, but why is there something recommended for staff that the applicant hasn't seen yet? I mean, I would feel like the applicant should see recommendations from staff. I'm having a little problem with that. Feel like we had an issue with staff earlier. We have an issue with staff now. So I'm wondering why staff would recommend something that the applicant hasn't seen.
I mean, the applicant received their report. We sent them out on Friday of last week. So why they're just now seeing, I can't answer that, but it was a condition in the report that was sent out, just like all of them always are. They go out as conditions of a recommendation when you get your report as well.
Thank you, Brad. Jeff, did you have a comment? Whoa, Jeff, you're not supposed to be commenting now. I'm sorry. Please excuse me. This is a staff only, unless they have a question. Any other staff comments related to the motion? All right, then we'll do a roll call vote. Rick?
Okay. Kenman?
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
Rowland,
Yes.
Scarborough,
Yes.
Tucker,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yeah.
Beresford,
Yes.
Bidrum,
Yes.
and Hall.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Carter and Reverends Stout, and I forgot your name, but thank you anyway. All right, now we're going to move on to our next application, which is, if I can get it here. This is a preliminary plan development, case number PD-2021-01-7, located at 225 Freeman Drive. And this request is to rezone one parcel currently zoned to RS 25 PD to RM1 PD. This is a comments only. The applicant is bringing this to the Planning Commission to get our ideas and our comments about the application. So there will be no vote taken tonight. Rick.
Okay, this is the location on Freeman Drive. It's the, as Brad mentioned in agenda setting, this is the currently the People of Hope Manufactured Home Park plan development. They did start a little bit of work before they were held up, and there is a parking area as well as some stormwater management. Some grading was done before it was held up. The future land use is residential mixed use, that will remain. The zoning would change from RS25 to RM1. The RS25 came about during the Sandy Creek Basin down zoning when the Mayor Commission asked that to happen due to lack of sewer in the area. This is the current binding plan on the property. It's the mobile home park. And interestingly, it had 40 manufactured homes, and this proposal is for 40 dwelling units. So the plan development, we're considering a target personal care home due to the size. It's more of a campus than just one home. But there's one parcel of 17 acres. It's again, the future land use will remain. Proposal is for 12 independent cottages, individual cottages, one commons building like a dormitory, and one community center. The commons building and community center will be a second phase. And this is the rendering that was given, showing the layout. You can see the parking lot's already there, would serve, I believe this is the community center. Let me get that backwards, but another parking lot down this end would serve the other building. And then the driveway would continue back so you see the 12 individual cottages. Just some architecture. These are the cottages that would go up in the first phase. And then you have the, this is the clubhouse, community center, sorry. Yeah, this is the community center. And then this is the commons building. So tonight we are receiving with comments. This is a plan development. So this is a preliminary plan. They'll come back with a master plan. We are reintroducing an isolated RM district, but it is compatible with a future land use designation that did remain from the current plan development, and is actually less dense than the current plan development as far as population would go, or people that would live on the site. plan development does, plan development by itself, per our code requires either there be multiple uses or waivers. There's other ways of handling binding plans, just binding with conditions. So right now we don't see a waiver, we don't see multiple uses. So I'm not sure the plan development is going to be able to use in this particular circumstance, but there are other ways to bind the plans. Compliance with design standards are needed. There were a couple of standards we pointed out for the zoning, again, or waivers needed for those. And then at first, Public Utilities had told us, and this is in your staff report, that they would require there's a lift station nearby, and they were requiring a lift station connection for the first phase rather than the packaged septic system that was proposed. However, we do have some more recent information that they may have changed their mind on that, and I'll let the applicant talk about that issue. The fire marshal is asking for more detailed plans just so he can make sure that there's adequate fire vehicle access and distances for fire safety. So that concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much, Rick. And now we'll move to the applicant. Is Mr. Smith here?
I'm going to be presenting that. Hi, good evening. My name is Amy Rittering, 1022 12 Oaks Place. I am representing the petitioner, Hope 139, Shelly Tanner. She is on the call, so if you do have specific organizational questions for her, she'll be able to answer those. Hope 139 is a not-for-profit organization formed for the purpose of supporting at-risk women and children. Currently, they are operating out of a single residence. That residence is full, and they do have a wait list for women who do need their help. They're looking to expand and kind of redevelop the 225 Freeman Drive site. It presents a unique opportunity. It was formerly zoned RM1 PD, and the people of Hope did kind of start that development process. There is some significant clearing, as you can see from the aerials. There was some regrowth back to that. They did install a detention pond as well as some of the components for a lift station that was required for that 40 mobile home site PD. The people of Hope and Hope 139 are not affiliated at all. The people of Hope, they did kind of dissolve and disappear, which led to, as Rick pointed out, the rezoning back to RS25. That binding site plan is still on the site, so we're looking to change that and amend it back to the RM1. Some of the uses we're looking to bring on the site are supervised housing, transportation assistance, counseling services, life skills training, support completing secondary education, as well as access to mental and physical health care. Now, as you can tell from that list of uses, it's not clearly cut and defined in the use chart. Prior to submitting this petition, we did meet with the planning director and came to the agreement that a personal care home, while it's not truly a personal care home, several of the uses that define that do meet our proposal. With regards to the design and development of the site, we are looking to utilize a cottage court design with those 12 cottages placed around a communal green space. These women are leaving their communities and their networks, and putting it on a communal green space kind of starts that sense of community that they're looking to start over with again. In addition to that, we are doing those 2 community buildings. The first is going to be the Commons building, which offers dormitory style housing, as well as meeting spaces and offices. In addition to that, there will be that community center. We're offering kind of a multi-purpose space for the kiddos to go and play sports downstairs and basketball and volleyball, as well as, cookout spots to have dinners for the whole community. That upstairs that's coming off of Freeman Drive, that's the second story, will have more office spaces as well as a larger meeting space for those services we're offering. With regards to phasing, this is going to be a 2-phased approach, largely based on funding. This is a not-for-profit organization, so the first phase would be those 12 cottages utilizing a septic system. It makes it a bit more palatable and affordable. The second phase is going to be the community buildings. Those will have to utilize the lift station or a lift station, which is a second approval, a separate process with mayor and commission. We understand that one. There's just not enough soils on the site to support additional septic uses for those two buildings. With regards to that first phase, we are looking to slowly introduce the cottages based on funding, while still utilizing the communal septic system. With regards to the staff report, we understand a lot of the staff comments. We can address those waivers, for example, the frontage, the 925 standards. I get it. We can change and update the narrative and the site plan to adjust that appropriately prior to the master submittal. We did meet with public utilities and discuss the concerns regarding the septic. They thought all of this was going on at once. It's not, it's going to be in phases. And they're amenable to allowing us to use a septic system. We have met with the fire marshal. We went over distances, the fire truck turnaround, and placement of hydrants. So that will all be illustrated clearer and shown on the master submittal. At this time, we are really interested in your comments and feedback regarding this site. So thank you. And Shelley, the petitioner, is on the call if you have specific organization questions for her. Thanks.
Thank you very much. All right. Seeing no one in the auditorium, I am assuming that there is no one who wants to speak in favor, nor anyone who wants to speak in opposition. Can you confirm that there is no one there?
That is correct.
Thank you very much. All right, with that, we'll come behind the rail for commission discussion. Comments or questions? Alice? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and get us started off on this. I remember when this became the People of Hope development, and I believe Lucy Rowland was on the Planning Commission, I think chairing it at the time, and I was actually on the Mayor Commission. I think this was one of the earliest votes that I took. At the time, I believe the Planning Commission voted against the PD, and the Mayor Commission voted for it. And I remember Lucy talking to me at that time and saying, this makes perfectly good sense, because the role of the Planning Commission is to look at the land use and its appropriateness, and the role of the Mayor and Commission is to look at that and also community needs and community values. So I've kind of held that in my head as now as I've moved over to the Planning Commission side. But I do recall that the big issue at the time was the lift station, the managing the sewer. So I think the presentation answered any of the questions that I had about how that's going to work, because I was unclear with the larger buildings. In terms of land use, assuming that water and sewer is and satisfactory to staff, I think this is an excellent use of this property, and I appreciate the cottage court design. It looks a little tough back in there, but this is also, this is a more suburban location than an urban city street. So I'll stop talking there, but I'm generally feeling real positive about this project and would like to hear what my colleagues think.
Are there other comments or suggestions?
Could I make a comment on something she said?
I'm sorry, Shelley. At this time, we are receiving Planning Commission comments.
I don't know how this works. Thank you.
That's okay. Sometimes I get confused too, for sure.
I'm listening.
Okay. Jeff?
I just want to say everything Alice said in 3 words. I'm a fan.
Lucy?
Well, thank you, Alice, very much for giving me a lot of credit for stuff that I'm really not deserving of. But the one thing that really came to mind on this is the lift station. That everything came down to the lift station when we were talking about this thing, God knows how many years ago. But I'm really pleased to see this as a possibility. We really need to be looking at this kind of housing in these kind of places, these locations. And to me, that's so important.
Lucy, Jim?
I was involved with the People of Hope when that tragedy took place, and it was really a disappointment to see that everything fell apart on the lift station. But I'm really pleased to see something that is so helpful to the community being proposed to pick up the pieces of that failure. So I really encourage you to keep going.
Thank you, Jim. Sarah?
I'm probably just going to agree with what everyone said. I think that I really believe in this type of, I'm not even, as much as I'm sort of interested in us considering things like cottage courts, I think that the sort of mission-driven nature of what this is appealing to me. I was actually involved in a development like this in a different state a few years ago, and the point of it was women whose lives had been touched by alcohol in some way. And these women lived in the cottages kind of indefinitely, actually. The idea was they were all, I think that there was maybe a low age minimum. And there was something about providing that kind of safety and services. A lot of them had a lot of trauma that they were working through. And so I really like this. I think that one of the things that might be actually, when Alice mentioned that it's a little, or I can't remember if it was Alice mentioned that it's a little tucked back, and I was thinking about this other place I was involved with, and a sense of safety was actually really important to what was going on there. And so I actually think that the tucked back nature of this is really important. And in fact, and I'm not making any assumptions about the families you intend to serve, but I just know with the women that we worked with that the safety thing was critical, and having a little bit of having the way that people enter the property kind of limited as well was kind of important to that. It wasn't a fortress by any stretch, but it was a very similar piece of property to this one, actually. And kind of same thing where there seemed to be some real intention, or there was intention behind, like there was a stream that ran through the property that had like salmon fingerlings running up it, and nature trails and things like that. So I think that if you're looking for feedback from us, my feedback is that I think this is great, and I think you've obviously thought about the security side of things when you came up with this rendering. And so I think I can't really imagine a better use for this property, actually. I think it's great.
Thank you, Sarah. Any other comments? I want to just say ditto also. When I was studying this and reading it, I found myself just sitting back in the chair, this visibly, and saying, oh my goodness, what a wonderful creative mission this is. Those were my very words. So Sarah's use of that word was exactly my same. So I commend you, and I'm a fan too. With that, if we don't have any other people who wish to speak, I'll entertain a motion. Oh no, we don't have a motion. We are only receiving comments. So that's great. So that gives you information to move forward with and carry on. And we look forward to hearing from you again. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on with our next application, which is, just a moment, things get all mixed up together. This is a zoning map amendment, case number zone 2021-01-8. It's located at 3320 Old Jefferson Road, and this is a request to amend existing conditions of an employment industrial zoning on the subject property from a previous rezoning in 2000.
Okay, this is, as Maxine said, 3320 Old Jefferson. 2000, I think the year was, that the employment industrial zoning was granted with several conditions. There are two tracks located off Old Jefferson, as well as access from Cathwood Drive. The first tract has been developed with several buildings, and they actually are, you can see the outlines of, like, I think condominium parcels. And the second lot with the arrow pointing to it is undeveloped at this time. And so well, I'll show you the plan in a second. This is the aerial view. Again, you see the undeveloped piece there, that where the campus, the medical center campus, would expand onto. The future development was actually not corridor residential. Sorry about that. It's actually employment. The purple employment future land use. The zoning is EI with those conditions. And you can see the other EI zoning in the area. This one actually is our next case. It's actually I right now, but it's just showing with both of these kind of going hand in hand what the map would look like. This is the current binding site plan, and did a little different binding plan at that time. It wasn't so detailed. You see various pockets of building and parking with some landscaping. So the site that we're looking at, the undeveloped site, just had a big building and parking envelope there. And a little bit of a blow up of that. And so this, when we talk about getting requests to remove a binding site plan, this is the site plan we're talking about. It's kind of generally binding, I guess you'd say. But a lot of conditions were put on there along with that site plan. So we are amending, the request is to amend several conditions. There's two parcels of 15 acres, employment center, future land use would remain. This is a proposal to expand the medical center campus. So again, to remove the bonding plan you just saw, and then also some zoning conditions be removed. Tract 1A, that's the developed parcel, to remove conditions pertaining to buffers and trees, signage, and lot coverage. And some of this is actually to go to meet the current code, to actually better, in a way, the improvements, because the current code today is just more, asks for more from developments than they did earlier, before 2000. And then track 3, the undeveloped one, also would have conditions removed pertaining to those buffers, trees, building height in this case, asking to go up to, I think it's 60 feet, lot coverage, lighting, and there was a fire flow condition, which normally we don't really get into. This is the property with the arrow pointing to it. That would be the expansion area. And this site plan also shows, again, the next case out here over here on Floyd Drive. And this is actually looking to the west, so north on the right side. Staff does find that the request is compatible with the future land use, and we are bordering other EI zone parcels. We do recommend approval with conditions that the existing zoning conditions not waived remain, that there'll be additions to there's an existing list of prohibited uses in the old rezoning, and we'd like to add some of those, and those are listed in the staff report. Also, that there's a buffer requirement now, and we would ask that where they join RS zoning, and this is, let me go back a second. This is back here on Club Drive. And so where they join that zoning, and this is undeveloped right now, so a possible future single family subdivision. And so we would ask that have either a 50-foot undisturbed to keep the trees basically there, or a 20-foot planted, heavily screened buffer adjoining that tract of RS zoning. And then a few more conditions actually if we're removing the binding plan. 14 and 16 also pertained, well actually 14 and 15 pertain to the binding nature of the plan. So that would go along with the removal of the binding plan. And then 16, which had to do with the some kind of disputed land at the time, which apparently was resolved, so they could start building. So that condition is no longer needed. And that concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much. All right, now we will hear from the applicant, Mr. Pittman. You've been patiently waiting. Now it's your turn. Mr. Pittman? Yes, there you go. Mr. Pittman, you're muted.
You're muted, Jack.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name's Frank Pittman with Pittman Engineering. I live at 1400 Saxon Road in Watkinsville. I'm the civil engineer working on the project. I'm here with Miss Loretta Goodson, who's the CEO of University Cancer and Blood Center. Also have Ben Watson on the, he's connected as well. He's one of the principals at Medical Partners of America, who is the development team working with the project. As Rick mentioned, we're here to ask for some modifications to an existing zoning. We're not asking to change the zoning. The property is zoned EI today. It works for our use. There's just some odd conditions that were placed on the original zoning back when there really wasn't a good plan for what the future held on the project. There are two parcels associated with the request. As Rick mentioned, parcel 1A is the existing medical complex there on Old Jefferson and Cathwood. That property is completely developed, built out. The only reason we have included that in this request is because the plan moving forward is University Cancer and Blood Center is in the rearmost building of that complex today. They have outgrown their facility drastically and have plans to build a new full-scale cancer center. As part of that, we would want to connect the existing building that they're in today to the new cancer center. Because that existing building is on this parcel, then we've got to monkey with the property lines a little bit so that building it over the property line, and by doing that, some of these conditions on track 1A don't work. There's a condition for a buffer that we obviously can't cross if we build a new building on it. There's a condition for site coverage. If we cut this existing building out of it, the site coverage, the lot then becomes smaller and the site coverage percentage goes up over whatever that condition was. So it's really just kind of cleaning up a little bit on that one so that we can connect these buildings together. There's no plan for any additional development or any changes on the existing lot 1A. On track 3, which is currently wooded track, is also zone EI. It was part of the original rezone. Some of the same conditions are on that.
what we are really asking for on that is to kind of bring it up to the current code. When this thing was rezoned 20 years ago, there were some parts of the code that were not, there wasn't a good lighting code back then. So there was a lighting condition, for instance, that now current code actually requires, better lighting coverage, site lighting coverage, and we're just asking to bring that up to code. Stuff as far as buffers, building height, site coverage, those kind of things. We want to just bring it up and be able to use current code. Signage. There was a condition about specific fire flow requirements. We feel that that's really a fire code and building code issue that doesn't need to be a zoning condition. We need to meet what the requirements are today, which are probably more stringent than what this condition was. Some of the landscaping, we're asking for those conditions to be removed and just follow current code, which actually we end up planting more trees in our parking lots and stuff by removing this condition than we would with the condition. So really a lot of the request is really just to clean up what was on this 20-year-old plan, and so that this thing can be developed for the most part under current code requirements. We are comfortable with the staff's recommendation. The additional conditions that they recommend, we're completely fine with. And so, we're here to basically ask you guys to allow this facility who, started in Athens. They're privately owned cancer center. They've got chemo treatment center here in Athens and a radiation treatment center that are in two different locations. They're excited about building a new cancer center, want to bring all this together into one location and be a partner for Athens-Clarke County for the next generation. With that, I'll kind of turn it over to Ms. Goodson, who I think is going to tell you a little bit about, who they are and kind of what they stand for. And then we'll finish up and let Mr. Watson speak for a few minutes as well.
Brad, how much time is left? Sorry, you're muted.
About 4.5 minutes.
Great. Okay.
Good evening, Loretta Goodson. My home address is 209 Wisteria Way here in Athens. And I'm the CEO for University Cancer, and I've been here with them 27 years. So I've moved to the different locations with the practice, and we moved here in this building in 2003. We have 11 physicians with our practice, and we have 12 advanced practitioners. And we have about a 240 staff member employees with our locations. 64 of them live in Clarke County, so we're proud to say that, there's a number of them that live here in Clarke County. We have radiation oncology, medical oncology, retail pharmacy on site, CT scanner. We do also for Live Well and palliative care, and we have a full-fledged lab services, so patient doesn't have to leave to get their lab work drawn before seeing the physician and getting their treatment. So we do all the chemotherapy on site. We also have radiation that's off site. Currently in this location, we have 2 buildings that we're in. So we are right now housing 2 different sites in this campus. We've outgrown the area, but we've been very committed to Athens-Clarke County since 1981. We'll actually celebrate our 40th year this year, so we're very excited about that. We have 6 other locations throughout Northeast Georgia that we serve, and we are really excited about bringing a state-of-the-art cancer center that would house everything under one roof, and patients would actually have one stop for their treatment, and whether it be medical or radiation oncology. And so we really look for your support in approving this application for rezone.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Watson.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. My name is Ben Watson, and my address is 711 Hill Street, Thomaston, Georgia. Occupation is real estate developer. We've been working with. I'm with MPA Developments, as Frank said, and we've been working with University Cancer and Blood Center for about 10 years now on their various projects throughout the Northeast Georgia. For the past year, we've been focused on this main campus here in Athens, planning for this project that's presented tonight. We've got our team in place. We have our architect, engineer, contractor on board. Our hope is to break ground third or fourth quarter of this year, which would put a project completion of 2022, the end of 2022 or the first part of 2023. So I just wanted to give a little bit of details of the project, and I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Watson. All right. With that said, I am looking at the auditorium, and I don't see anyone present, so I'm assuming that we have no one to speak in favor of this application and no one to speak in opposition. Can you confirm that for me, please?
That is correct.
Thank you. I'm always afraid someone's hidden around the sides that I can't see. So that's great. So we'll come behind the rail and have discussion amongst planning commissioners. Comments or questions? My goodness, I thought I was going to get to go first. All right, Lucy.
All right, I just unmuted myself. I talked to Brad earlier today and said that I'm a patient of this particular organization, and asked him if that caused any kind of conflict of interest. He said, no, I didn't feel like it was a problem. I'm a big believer in consolidating these sorts of health science organizations and campuses, and I think this is a really good use of this property. And I think this goes back to when they first started this particular campus out there, which you need a map to find it, but once you found it, it's really good. I think expanding in this particular place makes a lot of sense. And I'm very pleased with what is being contemplated for this particular project. So I really would like to see this thing go through. Oops. I have a horrible time with this.
Anyone else want to make a comment? Kristen?
Yeah, I was basically just going to echo what Lucy was saying. I'm familiar with this property. I actually did find it interesting in the report about the signage. If anything, actually, I feel like there should be more signage for this building with all the different doctor's offices and everything back there. Not going to kick that hornet's nest about signage, though. Basically, I think this is a great project. I think this is a great use of the property, and including the connection over to so Floyd Drive, like over the next property over. So yeah, I think this is great.
Other comments? I'm going to jump. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was just going to ask the chair if we'd be interested in entertaining a motion, but I'll let you speak first.
Thank you. I was just going to say I too, as Lucy, unfortunately and fortunately, have been a patient and am, and in fact was there this morning. I think it's a great use of the land, of the property. I think it's wonderful that they can consolidate. As a citizen, a patient and a citizen, I think we all know that I'm just talking and talking. Did anybody hear anything I said?
We heard everything except for the last couple seconds. You're good.
Okay. I was going to say, I think as citizens, we recognize the more consolidated things are, the easier they are for people to access. And in a cancer type situation, there are several kinds of needs. And for those to be in a similar place, I think that the business is lucky to have that property so that they can expand in that way. Maybe foresight was great initially. So, and then for citizens, I think it's very fortunate. And yes, Jeff, I'll be glad to entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion for approval with the conditions as posted by the staff.
Thank you, Jeff. And the second is by Lucy. Are there any questions or comments that need to be made on this motion? All right, then we'll call for the vote. Rick, roll call, please.
Okay, Scarborough,
Yes.
Tucker,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Beresford,
Yes.
Goodrum,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Kinman,
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
Rowland.
Yes.
Unanimous.
All right, thank you very much. And I think we're going now to move on to the next application, which I think we have many of the same players here. And so this is a zoning map amendment, case number zone 2021-01-9, located at 235 and 245 Floyd Drive. The request is for a zoning map amendment from industrial I to employment industrial EI on 2 parcels on Floyd Drive. Rick, can you fill us in?
Okay, this is the acacia map that the 2 parcels are at the end of Floyd Drive, which comes off of Old Jefferson Road. And this is the property we just saw with the last case. There's an intervening property also owned, I believe, by the medical campus folks. And if you drove out there, you may see, I don't know if they started work yet, but there's recently been a parking lot approved for out here. Current situation, there's a towing yard and a building, a garage type building out there right now. The employment future land use would remain. The zoning would change from I to EI. The request is for a straight rezoning. Again, the straight rezoning I to EI, 2 parcels of 4 acres, employment center future land use would remain. Proposal is for the medical center, and there's no binding uses or conditions with this. So the EI zoning would allow more commercial type uses. There's not that many different, but something like commercial indoor recreation, something like that. While it would restrict heavier industrial uses like heavy manufacturing, transfer stations, things like that. You see the arrow pointing, this is the 2 parcels in question at the end of Floyd Drive. And you can see the end of Floyd Drive is, right now it's just dirt. So that would be improved. So the request is compatible with the future land use designation. It does border other EI zone parcels. We are downzoning or replacing a more intensive zoning in this case to allow the medical center use. And it is a transition there at the end of the Floyd Drive between the industrial zoning on the rest of Floyd Drive, and then you have that RS zoning to the east that borders that same property being bordered as in the last case. So staff is recommending approval with the one condition from our Public Works Department that Floyd Drive needs to be improved, that cul-de-sac there, and so the developer would be responsible for making those improvements. That concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much. And now we will hear from the applicant. Mr. Pittman, are you starting that?
Yes, ma'am. Again, officially, my name's Frank Pittman. I live at 1400 Saxon Road, Watkinsville, Georgia. I'm a civil engineer representing the University Cancer and Blood Center. Again, I've got Ms. Goodson, Mr. Watson available as well. This one's probably a little bit quicker presentation. Basically, the Cancer Center owns this property. It has for a number of years. It's currently zoned industrial. We're asking to downzone it to employment industrial so that it fits in with the rest of the campus, which would allow for, as they continue to grow, they're able to expand the campus next time it needs to be expanded, or if they, may be able to draw in a different type of practice that works along with them. We feel like that it would create a nice transition as well. Right now, you've got industrial zone property bordering residential property, which typically we don't like to see. So we feel like downzoning it, not only helps the cancer treatment campus, but it also kind of creates that buffer between the industrial property and the residential. So again, we're asking for you guys to for your recommendation for approval on this, which would allow them for future expansion space, and again to keep this cancer center in the Athens community and allow them to continue to grow for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pittman. All right, and so it is now time for public comment. And knowing that there are no people in the auditorium to speak either in favor or against, then we will come behind the rail for comment from commissioners. Questions? Yes, Lucy.
I move approval with conditions as appointed by staff. Did you hear me?
Any other comments? Sarah.
I am interested in the former application where the condition was added that added to the list of prohibited uses. That was the second condition. That was the second condition, staff condition of the previous application. And I know that generally the commission seems favorable to this development in general, the medical center, but this is a straight rezone. And I think that in the past, it seems like we have an interest or a habit or whatever it might be to not do straight rezones without having a little bit better sense of what the limitations are about the use. So I guess I just wanted to throw the idea out there of adding that same condition to this application.
Can you remind us what that condition is so I don't have to go back to my things?
Yeah, so it's if anyone's looking at the staff report, it's on page 7 and it's the second condition. So it reads, staff recommends approval of the requested zoning map amendment with the following conditions. And then the second condition that I'm proposing that we add says complementary to the list of uses prohibited by the zoning condition, the existing zoning conditions, additional development shall be limited to the following uses: medical centers, professional services and office, administrative or research facilities, broadcasting or production studios, business or trade schools, colleges, and nursing homes. And as I said that just now, I realized that I'm just checking really quickly. So this one is going from I to EI. The former one was going Yeah, so that's a suggestion that I would like to at least throw out there for discussion. It seems like it's consistent with how they want to use the property anyway, but I'll let you all react to that.
Alice?
This makes a lot of sense to me. Clearly, the applicant wants this to be a campus of, so therefore some kind of unified thing. I will say that, when you look at the map, that this area abuts so closely up to the the industrial use to the north or northwest. I'd like to hear other people weigh in on whether y'all think that necessary to do what Sarah says, but I don't have any opposition to it. I just want to hear other responses.
Jeff?
Well, in fact, that was one of the things that I wanted to point out why this is attractive to me. I'm not a fan in general of downzoning our industrial areas to something less than, a place where you can make a lot of jobs in an industrial area, but its proximity to the RS zone, it turns it into a nice transition between what there is of industrial and oil storage tanks and all that stuff and the neighborhood. It brings it down. So I think in this one particular case, I would go along with it. I think that somebody could ask the applicant if they would object to that condition. I think it's a good idea. So maybe I'll ask, would the applicant care to comment on adding that condition to the rezone? Would you care to unmute first?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
We're fine with that condition. I guess the question, and maybe this is a question for Brad, how does that affect the existing business that's going on that property that will continue to operate until we redevelop that? Because that existing business would not be allowed under those conditions. We'd be fine with it once that business is gone. And maybe it's just a non-conforming use as an existing use. I don't know. I would defer to Brad, I guess, for whether or not that would be an issue with the existing business being there.
Brad?
The existing businesses on site, I mean, if the condition were added, they would just become legal non-conforming and grandfathered at that point. I mean, I think if you're going to add this condition, and the reason we did not is already really been mentioned, that we felt like going from an industrial current zoning to the employment industrial already limited the uses from what they can do out there today. And so we didn't feel like it was necessary. But if it was something you were interested in, I guess the part of that condition, because it's associated with some other conditions that remained in the report on the last one, to say complementary to the list of uses prohibited by existing zoning conditions, we don't have those on this property. So it would really just be the second part if you were going to add that as a condition.
Maybe to bring it in line, a statement to the effect of bringing it in line with the conditions imposed in total on the other parcel. Can we say that and have it make sense?
I mean, if you said that, I think we would just, we would interpolate that and then create that as a more detailed condition before it moves forward to make sure all the uses are listed. Yes. If the applicant's okay with that, we can make that happen.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're fine with that. I mean, my only concern was the existing business there, but once they're gone, then obviously we're completely fine with it.
All right. Other comments or questions? All right, then I will entertain a motion.
We have a motion on the floor.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We did that to begin with, didn't we? First thing off, excuse me.
I don't think it's been seconded, but let me restate it with the conditions as listed by staff and with the additional condition that the restrictions be brought in line with the piece of property at 3320 Old Jefferson Road. Does that work?
Yes, and who did second it? Joey, did you second? Who seconded that motion, Rick?
Well, it was, I think the sound was going in and out. I just saw a hand. I thought Jeff actually did it. I saw his hand go up.
I think Lucy made the motion, Jeff seconded.
Lucy did. So Lucy, is that those conditions?
Hold on, I made the motion. I'm fine with the second. Changes.
That's great. Thank you very much. All right. Any questions before we vote on the motion? Any comments? One thing I wanted to say that I meant to say in the last one that I didn't was we are very pleased. Oh my goodness, what did I do? I brought something up here. We are very pleased to have the Cancer Center in Clarke County. And I didn't want that to go unsaid. We appreciate you continuing to utilize our county for your services. All right, so I think we're ready to vote. Rick, would you call the roll, please?
Rowland?
Yes.
Scarborough?
Yes.
Tucker?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Beresford?
Yes.
Goodrum?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Kinman?
Yes.
And Morales?
Yes.
Unanimous?
All right, thank you very much.
Thank y'all.
Appreciate you all spending the night with us, I guess.
Thank you.
So now you can go home. And we're moving on to our next application, which is a pre-development amendment, case number PD-2020-01-28, located at 1698 South Village Avenue. And the purpose of this request is to amend an existing RM1 plan development, which was originally approved in 1989. Rick, you're on. Excuse me, Rick, before you move on, I like to say this at the beginning. This is, we are discussing this tonight to provide comments for the applicants. There'll be no vote taken. This is, this session is really to provide help for the applicant in knowing how we feel about what they're doing and what suggestions we might make. All right, Rick, move forward.
Rick, you're muted.
Sorry, it just automatically did that. Okay. You can see the condos outlined there in the red, and then the undeveloped portion of property to the north along Grand Ellen. And that's the property, piece of property in question. The traditional neighborhood future land use designation will remain. The zoning RM1 PD will also remain. We're just, as Maxine mentioned, we're just amending an existing 1989 plan development. This is the current binding plan on the site. Again, you can see the condos here. There's about 8 units, one entrance off of South Millage. And as you go north, there's some stormwater improvements coming down by South Millage. And you can see the frontage along Grand Ellen, and it's hard to make out. I think I blew this up a little bit. Still hard to read, but it's a natural area. So this is 125 Grand Ellen. So everything between that property and Millage right now is a natural area per the plan development. Also, you can see the stormwater pipe there. Just want to mention that. So it's if you've gone out there, it's hard to see from the street, but it's basically a sunken area, and then you've got the stormwater coming through there. So we are amending R1 PDs, 2 parcels, about 1.5 acres. The condo association, it was formed after the PD was created, but it did not include the 115 Grand Ellen Drive parcel, so that parcel is part of the natural area on the 89 plan, as well as the piece to be subdivided, the 0.128 acre of the condominium parcel to be transferred to individual ownership. So that both those are currently natural areas. The traditional neighborhood future land use remains. There is one waiver to create the new lot there. They break it apart and subdivide, so that's a lot depth waiver. This is the plan that's been provided. You see the shaded area that is to be carved out of the condo association parcel. And again, we're not removing it from the plan development at this time. We're just removing it from the condo parcel. So we'll have, instead of 2 tracks, we'll have 3 tracks in the plan development. This is comments only tonight, and just want to mention that this green space was set up in 1989 for the purposes of a buffer, a natural buffer between the Grand Ellen single-family homes and the condominium development, and staff does not support elimination of the green space from the plan development. Now, currently, there will remain green space in the plan development, but we just want to make that known at this time. Clarification is needed as to the purpose of the requested amendment. Some of the reports, some of the documents mention green space only, others mention combination with the adjacent lot of 115 Grand Ellen for purposes of development. So again, that would take for any development, that would take a second zoning action by the Planning Commission and Mayor and Commission. So there are some site plan revisions needed. Staff received some plans that weren't to scale, and there's some complete meets and bounds needed for all the property. And then also Public Works is asked that the complete stormwater management system be shown. There's some improvements on the parcel to be broken off that we'd like to see how that has been improved, and we're going to need some easements that will guarantee its continued function. So that concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much. And so now we'll hear from the applicant, Mr. Carter.
Hey, good evening. Jeff Carter, 3651 Marsfield Road in Watkinsville. And I'll be brief. I know we're the last on the agenda here. Chad and Stephanie Powell came to us a few months back, and they own the most northern townhome, or condo, I should say, okay? So they own the condo that's closest to this property that we're looking at tonight. And what they would like to do is purchase this property from the Townhome Association. They've talked to the Townhome Association. They've agreed to sell them this property, and they would like to put a fence up for their dogs. There's no place for their dogs to go when they're at the townhome or condo, and that's really all they're asking to do. There was in the report, which I think caused some confusion with staff. As consultants, sometimes we look at these things and we're like, well, it would make sense to combine it with an adjacent parcel if it ever became available. It's not available, and we clearly understand that if that ever happened, we would have to come back before you guys to begin with. So I just want to make sure that you guys understand that what Chad and Stephanie Powell want to do It's just have a place for their dogs to roam while they're there, because they can't let them in the condo. So that's really all that we're asking for. And I will say this, Chad Powell is on the line here, and you feel free to ask me or Chad any clarification questions, but that's really all we would like to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. With that said, I am seeing that in our auditorium, this is the time we would have public comment. And we have no one in attendance to speak in favor or against the application. So we will come behind the rail and have discussion amongst commissioners. Jeff.
I'm a little anxious for the reasons that have been mentioned earlier, that when you cut the parcel loose and make a tiny parcel next to another parcel, then it becomes a target. I do not know if it is possible to solve the problem of creating a dog run in a different way. I don't know if it's intended to be connected directly to the existing condo, but a condo association could build a dog park for the use of its residents, perhaps. And given that that it does become an attractive nuisance, if you will, an attractive target for something other than the intended use of it today. And yes, keeping in mind that, yeah, you'd still have to come back to get something changed, but it's still, there it is. So I just wonder if there's not another solution that accomplishes the same thing without putting, if you want to call it, the community at risk of something unfavorable happening, even unintentionally. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other comments? Kristen?
I guess maybe, and I'm sorry, I feel like I keep reading the report and hearing people talking, and I don't know why it's not sticking with me, but help me understand the relationship between, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at this like you all can see what I'm looking at. So like there's that tall, like if I'm looking at the big map and you have this shaded area of the property, but then there's that also triangle adjacent to it to the left. Are those two both part of this condo property, or are we just talking about the shaded area?
We're just talking about the shaded area.
And what's the relationship between the shaded area and the triangle?
The triangular piece of property that's listed as North Development, that triangular piece of property, I don't know, that's owned. Now, my understanding, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but looking at these documents going back to the 80s, that was originally part of the what was shown on the green space in PD, and that was removed at some point. But there's absolutely no relationship between the Townhome Association or Chad and Stephanie Powell with that triangular piece of property.
And I may be able to clarify a little bit more. And Jeff's right. When this PD was done back in the late 80s, the triangle piece of property and the skinny piece that we're talking about tonight were all one part of the overall PD, and it was the area to provide open space as a buffer to Grand Ellen Drive. Carlton North was one of the developers involved in it back in the 80s, and when Carlton set up the condo association, he reserved that triangle out of it for himself as a standalone lot. But it is still, for purposes of what we're looking at, It is still just green space that's associated with the PD. I don't know if Carlton's been paying taxes on it for 30 years or not, but it is a buffer as part of the PD that just did not get written into the condo association. But that does not mean it's not still part of the PD.
But by changing the PD, are we changing the PD on that property too?
No, all you're doing is amending the PD to basically carve out that little strip into a separate standalone parcel so the condo association can sell it to the Powells.
Okay, thank you.
Matt and then Lucy.
That triangular piece of land, it looks like it changed hands about 3 months ago. Carlton North sold it to something called Carriage House Realty.
Carriage House Realty, yes.
Can the applicant clarify if there's any relationship between Carriage House Realty and the Powells?
Not that I'm aware of. As far as I know, there's no relationship at all. I think Chad Powell's on with us. He may be able to
Sure.
Answer that.
Yeah, I can speak to that. We have no relationship whatsoever to Carlton North. My wife and I have owned the condo. We actually own Unit 1 and Unit 2. We've owned them for 16 years. And we've been there probably the longest tenant of all the condos. And we approached the association about just really turning that lot that's next to us that we overlook into kind of a backyard. And they were very supportive of it. If you come visit the condos, you'll notice the other building has a very similar setup already on the other end towards the opposite direction of Grand Ellen. And there's green space down there as well. But it is not conducive for the dogs within our organization. So go right ahead, Lucy. Sorry.
No, I mean.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Lucy.
Okay. As Brad said, I'm probably the oldest person that ever existed on Planning Commission. And I remember when this came through and he first mentioned Bubba Head, my first reaction was, it wasn't Bubba Head, it was Carlton North. And I do have a good memory. The feeling is this is kind of a brainer. This was a development that just took in property that was sitting on South Millage that was going to be developed, and everybody in 5 Points went nuts and said it has to be single family because it was going to be a condo. And it really turned out to be pretty good. But it had these extra pieces of property. Just go look at the plat. And the plat says this wasn't nice and clean. I don't think this is a big deal, to be honest. I think this is something that's pretty simple. It was something that happened how long ago was it, Brad? 25 years, 30?
30, it was 1989.
Okay, oh my God. Okay, it was 30 years ago. Things have changed tremendously. I think we are really trying to overthink this. And I think this is something that just needs to be taken care of, to be honest.
I think Bubba and Carlton were partners on this one.
Oh my God.
Sarah.
The piece of property that we're talking about is just over the minimum for RM1. Is that right? A little bit over 5,000. Is the RM1 5,000 minimum lot size? So this one's a little bit more than that. Do the owners have with this change, would the owners have the ability to develop it at RM1?
No.
Wouldn't be, why? Why wouldn't they?
Because all they're doing is just creating another parcel, but it is still, from a PD standpoint, it's still in the PD, and it is the buffer portion of the PD that still remains. In order for them to change that, they would have to come back to you again and say, we now want to either amend the PD again, or we want to remove this from the PD so we can develop the property. But they're not asking you to do that right now.
Okay.
Or they may not ever ask you to do that. That's what they're telling us.
Honestly, I don't find that particularly problematic either. I mean, but I just was kind of curious if, if that potential would exist. They'd have to come back for a rezone. When the PD happened years ago, what was the idea? Why was it felt that they needed to have? This is actually not that relevant. I just am curious to know, why did they think there needed to be a buffer between this and the Grand Ellen? Like, why was that a thing on such a? I assume that Millage Avenue was just as busy of a road then as it is now. Was that? Do you remember why? Lucy, you've got your.
That's going to be a Lucy. I was not here yet.
Oh.
Only by a couple of years, but I was not quite here.
That's a Lucy answer, and the Lucy answer is anytime you had a change in zoning from like RM to RS, there had to be a buffer. And that is so 1980s.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
We don't do that anymore. You really don't do that anymore. Some places still try to do it, but I mean seriously, if there was a change in zoning from an RS, 10 or I'll say RS 10, which is probably what it was on Grand Ellen, to an RM1, it had to have a buffer.
Okay.
That's
so that's
it.
maybe how this got in here in the first place.
Yeah, that's 30 years old.
Okay, are there any more questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Just receiving with comments.
I'm so sorry. I made that so plain in the beginning, didn't I? All right, that's great.
If there's any conversation, Maxine, I was just to making a motion.
Oh, good. I feel so much better. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Carter. And Chad, I can't remember Chad's last name, but thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
Can I just, if we're just for comments, can you just make a quick comment then? Sorry, I think I was kept looking at this like we're voting on it. So if this is coming, is this going to come back before us? Come back again then? I mean, would it maybe help? Like, would it make sense to see where a fence would go, to see a plan where a fence would go or something like that? Like, if that's the purpose of this, would it make sense to then see a plan that does show here's where a dog run would be, or here's where a fence would be? If we're talking about a amendment to a plan development, does that make sense?
I mean, yes, that's something you're interested in. You can absolutely ask for that to be shown on the master plan.
I mean, it just seems like since there was some questions what's the use of this property, and if that's what's going on, then maybe if the applicant were to come back and say, sorry, there's lots of people with mics open. If the applicant were to come back and say, here's where we're going to put the fence and here's where the dog run will be, then I think, that would be cool, and I don't think there'd be any issue with that. So
I'd be happy to do that.
Kind of fence would be really important on this piece of property.
I'd like to put in the matching fence to the property at 1698, which is the metal fencing, the nicer fencing, that kind of wrought iron. Because I've been there 16 years. I want it to be very nice and match the existing condo development and stay consistent.
Lucy?
Very good. I have chain link fence around my backyard and it's ugly as sin. Whatever you can put in that looks good, do it.
Okay.
All right, I think that concludes our comments. And so we'll now move to other business. I have no report at this time. Brad, do you have a report?
I do. Got a report from Tuesday night's Mayor and Commission meeting. This was a combination of the December and the January voting meetings of you all. So there were 8 items. First item, the Mitchell Street condo multifamily that went through. It was held at the request of the applicant until the Mayor and Commission's March meeting. So they did not take any action on that one way or the other. The rezoning request out on Old Jefferson Road was sent back by the commission to you. So it's going to be back on your agenda in March with a binding site plan this time. And that was the one that it was just a straight zone and they were talking about some things, but really nothing. So that you'll see that again in March. The design standards, the creation of the North Downtown Design District, and then the associated amendments to both the River District and the West End to allow also ground floor residential in certain areas. It was approved, but there was a commission-defined option that removed the ground floor residential from River and West End, and only it will allow it in the North Downtown. And then the rezoning associated with the North Downtown area to commercial downtown was also a commission-defined option. They removed all of the townhouses on the east side of College Avenue, as well as when you go the piece right next to the railroad where there are 5 or 6 student rental type single-family houses all on one lot. Everything on that right side of College, once you went past the fire station, was not included in the commercial downtown. It remains RM2. The next item was the Lexington Road rezoning that Smith Planning Group brought forward. It was held, and the commission will take it up again under a special called meeting next Tuesday night before their work session to vote on it. There were some issues with execution. There is an agreement now evidently with the land trust to kind of have third-party control over the affordable units, and that the agreement was made, but it came very late and they did not have an executed copy. So that will be voted on next week. The special use for the multifamily out on Highway 29 behind Kroger was approved along with the variance. The Tracy Street rezoning from EI to EO plan development there across from Chase Street warehouses was approved. And then the special use amendment to the package store on Tallahassee Road was also approved. And that's all.
Madam Chair.
Sarah, yes, Alice first, and then
Yeah, so I'm loath to prolong any meeting, and thank you for the report, Brad, but can we go back to the Lexington Road one for just a minute? So that's not coming back to us. They're holding it so that they can get some sort of good on paper agreement with Athens Land Trust. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that's correct.
Sarah, are you going?
I see you're muted. Should I go ahead?
I said, are you going to ask a question about that piece of property?
No, I have a question about a different item. So.
May I insert a question about that piece of property? Was there any discussion about the fact that all of the affordable housing is pulled out and put on the side together?
There was, and there was evidently some continued ongoing discussions between the applicant and I'm gonna mute you real quick, Maxine. The applicant and the commissioner for the district, and there were some added conditions that are also being considered. Pretty much the things that we asked you to consider if you approved it were now turned into conditions of a commission approval, including the integration of the amenities was one. I mean, they didn't change the design any. The 62 units are still in the single building up front, but whereas you were told by the applicant that, you know, those residents would have access to the walking trail, but not to the pool and the other things with the market rate, they have now agreed to a condition that full amenity access would be provided to all residents regardless, as just one of the conditions. But there was no physical redesign of the plan from the time it left you all with your recommendation until now.
Thank you. Sarah?
I just wanted to ask about the item, the North Downtown Design District. Brad, did you say that they've made it so that in the River District and West End, you still may not have ground floor residential? Is that right?
They basically have said that in those two areas, you would still have to ask for a special use permit to do it.
Okay. And I assume you heard the conversation about that, but did you get a sense for why they wanted to keep that there? Or, yeah, keep that restriction there, I guess is the way to say that.
I mean, the conversation that I heard during the agenda setting meeting was largely around the notion that in those other two areas, I think they used the Finley Street project that you all recently approved, the larger one where the old Days Inn is. They felt like that if you made those types of ground floor units by right, that it would eliminate some of their ability and or your ability to affect the design of a project before it was approved.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Kristen?
And then I just wanted to ask real quick, has there been any progress on planning meeting with the mayor and commission to talk about the rental units, the discussion that we had?
We have not. We are scheduled to meet with them in a retreat format next week. The purpose of that is to largely, hang on. The purpose of the meeting with the mayor and commission at the retreat next week is to go over, right now we've got a list of assignments that are outside of the normal day-to-day, week-to-week operations of our department, like rezonings and variances, and there's about 40 additional projects that have been added, whether they're committee assignments or whether they are looking at the short-term rental regulations or other things. And so they've asked us to bring them a priority listing of what we think we need to do and when, and then they will ultimately have the ability to designate what is top priority. But right now, what we will be presenting to them is what you all talked about at your last work session, I believe, with priority to the growth concept and future development map. And then that should be the catalyst for the specific detailed amendments that deal with housing changes and other things. So we have not received any further direction on that at this point.
And Brad, can you speak to when our next meeting to engage in that discussion will be?
That next meeting will be in March. We're not going to do a February meeting right now, partly because I'm going to be out of the office for the next few weeks, and we're really kind of waiting to see what we find out next Friday from the mayor and commission in terms of priority to then lay the groundwork to move forward. We're going to push hard from a staff standpoint that we need to update the growth concept map and the future land use map. And that is priority one from a staff standpoint, because we feel like that will drive a whole lot of the hard work that taking the hard work that you all did last year and putting it on the map in terms of appropriate locations and appropriate land uses and appropriate spots. But we will see what they say with that. I think Lucy's had her hand up for a while too.
Yes, Lucy.
This is just an announcement. Maxine, you may have known George Harry Sr. or not. Wilmer Harry's son. And there are other people on this board that knew him. He died on January 21st at age 93, principal of Harry & Harry Architects, internationally known, an amazing person. And he grew up in Athens. And I was very proud to have known him. And this town has a lot of contact with his family. And I just wanted everybody to know that this was a person who really impacted Athens and Atlanta and internationally.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for mentioning that. I'm very grateful. I think it is important for people to know that. I had one more question, Brad. Have you heard any, had any response about our work that we did last year?
No. I mean, I know that it's still on the radar. I know it is. And, you know, that's honestly, that's going to be one of the issues when we present to them next week that I expect to be contentious and go into it with full understanding that we don't get to make that decision. Ultimately, it's their directive. But the way we've got our work program laid out right now, we're saying to them that let the planning commission get through the future land use map adoption first with meaningful community input and participation, and then start on that. But what that does on the schedule is it pushes revisiting those items out about 16 or 17 months from now in order to do it. I'm not sure that's going to go over well, and I completely get it. But, you know, from a staff standpoint, we feel like that's our best professional recommendation to them, that from an overall community value standpoint, we need to do this update as was identified in the 2018 comp plan. You're muted.
Jeff?
Yeah, I have one administrative request. Ordinarily after the meeting, I leave my empty envelope on the desk, but I leave my empty envelope on the desk and now there's a pile of empty envelopes because Rick doesn't come to my house and collect them because the door's locked. If somebody would send me an email the night before they're going to come around and deliver next month's packet, I will leave a selection of barely used envelopes for them. I'd like to get them used at least one more time. So if somebody can put that on their day before calendar, I'd appreciate it.
That's a great idea. I keep having mine stacked up over here also, and I've wondered should I just throw them away? So,
No.
I have to hard co-sign on Jeff's request. I really miss the envelopes that I got that had, you know, Alice Kinman on it, and it was all frayed around the corners, and I knew it had been the Alice Kinman envelope for. But yeah, they're in my recycling bin right now, and I would love to show more love.
Yeah, when I had a worn envelope, I felt like I was working, but with these pristine envelopes, it's just a little weird. So
I hang on to my envelopes. I will have them until I can bring them down to the planning department.
Oh,
like in a stack this high.
I tell you what, I think we'll have Rick, because Rick's in charge of getting all that together, and he's the one that knows the schedule on when they're going. And we'll make a point to send all of you an email the day before they're coming. And so if you want to leave anything out on the porch for us that's worthy of us bringing back, we will get it and bring it back. So,
do you just want the envelopes, or do you want everything that's inside of it?
probably just the envelopes, but I think the rest of it y'all can recycle just like we can. But
we can shred and recycle. I get it.
Yeah.
All right. I think we've done enough talking for the evening. I earned my money tonight. I want to tell you all that, boy, I earned my money. It was this was an interesting meeting. So we will hopefully can get our issues about hearings resolved. I think that will help us all. And just to get lined up what we're getting and who's and what's. And I think that ought to really depend on what the attorney says is legal. And then from there, we'll see where we move on that. So With that said, do I hear motion that we adjourn? Jeff, thank you so much. Jeff's hand always blends in with the trees.
It was Lucy. She beat me.
Okay. And a second? All right. We herewith are adjourned. All right. You all have a wonderful, wonderful month. How's that?
Y'all too, and I'll be in touch later in the month.
Now, Brad,
Bye,
when
Patty.
you
Thank you.
surgery, Brad.
It is still scheduled right now for Tuesday, but I don't know what time.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, good luck to you.
It's outpatient. It's amazing what medicine can do now, but I'm not sure how my durability will be to be back for long periods of time
Exactly.
and sit through in a chair for 5 hours at a meeting. So that's my biggest concern right now.
Well, good luck to you.
Well,
A big
good luck.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.